As many of you already know, I've been out of Division 2 for quite some time. Pretty much since November, but I did log in for a couple days in February to get the new skill and to see, just how poorly they killed off Fei Lao, and then of course to test that skill in an actual mission before shutting off the game for, many more months. Earlier this month, I actually came back to have some fun in skirmish, only to discover I got really rusty. And, okay, being honest, the first day was actually absolute garbage. Now, generally, I would consider myself to be quite good at the game, but after those first few matches of skirmish, I was left thinking, what the actual hell is going on? For context, in PvE, I was generally the top guy for accuracy in the after-action reports. I would typically hit in the 50 to 60% range, while I usually found most random players came in around 30 or 40%. Now, the long break combined with the upgraded frames on the Series X that I recently got really threw me for a loop, not to mention the new controller feel, playing some small part. I mean, look, if you're used to playing a game, one way and then you come back after a long break and you're playing it kind of a different way with the new controller, yeah, of course, it's going to feel a little bit off to you. But my first match felt so off that I was actually thinking that the devs did some sort of secret aim and movement nerf. It really felt bad. And after a few more matches, my senses did start to return, but my aim was still far from acceptable. It wasn't good. So I decided I needed to actually do something a little different. Now the topic of this video is AR weapon handling, but more specifically the stability aspect of it, because I think it probably plays the largest role in most, full auto weapons that are used. This can be a bit of a touchy subject for a couple of reasons though. First, we all know that the meta basically states if you are running DPS, you must pretty much roll everything in crit. Second, we know that in the Division, the God complex is real. And this is especially true in PvP. People refuse to accept their flaws and instead divert blame by insisting someone cheated. I'm not saying that cheaters don't exist, but to think that you are so good that only cheaters can beat you is kind of a joke. And this lack of self-awareness makes it very difficult for people to kind of break free of the supposedly best in slot roles, because that's what people are using, so it means that's what people need to use. And that's just not true. Now, what I'm going to say on the matter is this. If you are extremely good at shooters, like, top 10% good, accuracy and stability enhancements may be, in large part, kind of useless to you. Because, the whole point is to hit the target. And if you're already hitting the target, then adding something that helps you do that is not really going to help you much. And to be honest, before the break I took, I would have generally put myself in this category. I really didn't see that I needed those things. Alright, let's stop here for a second. After actually having a look through a good amount of that old footage and just kind of trying to compare the aim, for the purpose of, just researching this video better, I would actually say that even though I thought I was having really great aim in PvP, I do see that I could have benefited a large amount from actually having a good portion of this on my build. So, the lesson there is no matter what you think, it's always just good to check and actually make sure. If, like most players, your aiming falls into the classification of average or below average, handling stats can actually do wonders for you. How much you need really depends on your own self-evaluation, though. I would generally suggest adding about 50% stability with weapon mods and testing how it actually feels for yourself. And that is mostly because weapon mods are just easy to switch out. Remember, we're just trying to figure out if it actually works for you before, farming for a bunch of gear that turns out you don't need. Now, let's be honest about weapon handling. It is, in fact, a maximum DPS drop. There is no getting around it. You do lose potential damage by adding it to your gear. However, it does make it more likely that you can actually apply the damage you do have to an actual target. Again, how much you really need depends on you. And one of the benefits of constantly recording my gameplay is that I can actually see real in-game results. Being able to see how many shots I make versus how much time my reticle spends above or next to a target's head is very valuable info. Remember, damage is great, but only if you're actually hitting something with it. Now, weapon handling does include more than just accuracy and stability. It does include reload speed and swap speed. But either way, the three main ways that you can actually adjust weapon handling or stability for your needs is that weapon handling comes on your gear roll, so you can roll it on your individual armor pieces. You can also get accuracy, stability, or additional handling from those brand sets that you may use. Weapon mods are also an additional way that you can add stability, accuracy, or handling. And finally, there are talents that you can get on your weapons or on your armor, like Brace, that give you 45% weapon handling while you're in cover. Armor rolls, however, are largely where we see a lot of the disagreement, because adding 6 weapon handling rolls on gear is actually a bit costly in terms of the damage that it takes away. Prior to my break, I viewed adding 3 stability mods to an AR as one of the best balances between damage and control, even though I usually would just put on, crit hit chance or crit hit damage for those slots. But after giving it further thought based on my preferred weapon, the AK, I found that, the weapon talent might actually be the best place to gain some added stability. Like many players, I used Ranger quite a bit on pretty much all of my builds, but given that my typical boost from the talent was only about 4 to 8% amplified damage, it really wasn't hugely important, especially when factoring in the number of missed shots at longer ranges. In fact, many of the most used AR talents like Measured, Optimus, Strained, and In Sync are not really adding as much DPS as people commonly hope in real game situations. And look, what I mean by this is that, if you're using In Sync, and that's a very popular talent for DPS builds, look, if your shield gets popped and it's down for 20 seconds, you're not probably going to be getting much benefit from that talent at all. And of course, constantly pulling it out and putting it back in every... and of course, constantly having to, use the skill and de-equip the skill over and over again does cost, time and damage. So you may get a good burst damage for 5 seconds, but after that, are you getting any benefit from it? And generally speaking, the answer is no. And it's kind of the same way with Strained or Optimist or Measured. If your magazine is full, you're only going to be getting a slow increase in damage until you completely empty the magazine. And what this means is that, generally speaking, it's easy to confuse how good something is in the range when it's used, exactly as you intend. When the AI or other players don't stick to the actual rules you want, however, the bonuses you thought you were getting are generally far weaker. So for the reasons I already described, being pretty rusty and terrible at the game, and, kind of just deciding that a lot of those talents on weapons really don't benefit you all the time, I just decided to try Nearsighted on one of the random AKs I had laying around, and pretty much I was just an instant fan of it. Now, I have used the talent before, but I've ignored it because, I wanted bigger damage numbers, as, pretty much anyone else does. Now, if you've actually been playing Division 2 since Warlords of New York dropped, I'm sure you're familiar with the Near God Roll Glory Days that was sold shortly after it went live. The weapon, honestly was just a straight up beam, but it was also the perfect version, giving it, 100% stability versus the normal 80%. So I wasn't really sure how beam the AK would be, and to my surprise, it actually seems like the AK moves less than the actual Glory Days. Now, of course, some of you are going to say that the talent drops weapon range so much that it is almost pointless. To which I would actually ask you, have you tried hitting a target past 50 meters with an AK or most other ARs before? And before you say, well, yeah, I can hit, things fine, no problem, have you actually looked at footage of yourself shooting at a target that range and seeing how many shots on target you actually hit? To be honest, most people don't do that. Most people just see that they're hitting the target and they think it's fine. In reality, half or more of their shots are completely off. Sometimes you're only hitting like 20%. And this is pretty much what I found when I was going through a lot of the footage. Yeah, I could hit an enemy that was really far away with Ranger, but of course, how many shots was I actually getting on target? Most of the time, it wasn't as many as I thought it was. So my damage as a total was basically being dropped. Nearsighted has in fact been so successful on my AK that I've actually made it pretty much my go-to weapon on almost all of my non-skill builds. Not only because I actually hit more shots, which alone is a very strong reason, but because I am getting far more reliable headshots. And of course, hitting more shots and more of them being headshots seems like a pretty strong validation to me as to why I would want to use the talent. Now, to get 80% stability on an AK, which is what Nearsighted does, any other way would actually pretty much be ridiculous. I mean, a chest talent alone would not be able to do that, and would require at least 2 additional weapon mods or 4 weapon handling mods on armor rolls. And without the chest talent, you pretty much need every slot to have weapon handling, and you'd need all your weapon mods to be rolled in stability or something like that. So in terms of getting the best results with the least negative impact, I think this is pretty much it. Now again, this depends on how well you actually shoot and not how well you think you shoot. Just going into the range with targets that do nothing and only beaming the 5-meter target in the head is not proof you can actually shoot well. If you really want to judge this for yourself, record yourself playing through missions and PvP. Count the number of bullets you use to drop enemies, not just the damage you do per bullet. But either way, guys, I think it's just interesting to see just how well this talent has helped me out since coming back. Am I going to continue to use it? Probably, yeah, actually. Is it going to take a little bit more, study and a little bit more, investigation on my part, whether I get better at aiming just, from being back in the game, or is this, something that I'm just going to continue using because no matter what, it's just, more beneficial for my build? Look, there's a lot of things to consider and a lot of footage to look over just to see how beneficial this talent is, because unlike crit, which is very easy to calculate, I hit this many bullets, my probability of hitting, a crit is this, and, statistically speaking, per magazine, I'm going to hit 60% of my bullets as crits. Like, that is something that's very tangible to actually calculate. When you're looking at something like weapon handling, accuracy, stability, that kind of stuff, it's a lot more situational. I mean, to be able to actually adjust on the fly, whenever an enemy's moving. If I'm fighting an enemy at 5 meters, well, accuracy, stability might not apply. If I'm fighting an enemy at 10 to 15 or maybe even 10 to 20, maybe there's a middle ground there with how much it's beneficial. And of course, yeah, if I'm fighting an enemy that's, like 50 meters away, having a beam on him is going to make it a lot easier. But then, of course, I also have to calculate in the damage that I'm losing from him being that far away compared to what it would normally be without, that talent. So there's definitely a lot of things to take into account there. But overall, I can definitely say that I've seen a huge improvement from when I came back to when I started using this talent. But like I said, it's really hard to quantify just how well this kind of talent is working because, there's really no numerical calculation that you can make in all of these random, situations that kind of say whether this is a best in slot or not. What I can say is that, based on the way that it feels, based on, the overall success of it, it definitely seems to be something that is working very well. So again, this requires some critical thinking from your part, some investigation into what your actual skill level is, because you need to be honest if this is going to benefit you. If you are really a good player, then no, it's probably not going to benefit you that much. If you are a terrible player, or at least, your aim is terrible, and I mean, there are plenty of players who will admit that their aim is very bad. If you are one of these players, then look, I think weapon handling is probably just going to be one of the best stats for you because, look, if you're not hitting anything, then crit's not going to do anything for you anyway, so what's the point in having it? You might as well just switch to handling. But either way, guys, thank you for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.